Unstable Games have made plenty of products that you probably recognize, from unstable unicorns to Here to Slay. Today we're going to be talking about Happy Little Dinosaurs, one of my favorites, mainly because it's about dinosaurs. So let's get started. First off, it comes with a little rulebook, like most games do, that tells you exactly how to play, all the different rules, shows you how to set up your table. There's a little depiction of how you set up your table. You got your little character board, you got your decks, discard piles, which we'll get into a little bit. So the first thing you're going to do, like a lot of their games, you're going to pick a character. In the base game, there are 4 characters to pick from. So it's a 4-player game. You have Stego, Nervous Rex, Triceratops, and Bad Luck Bronto. Now when you pick which character you want, you put it in front of you and you open it up like this. This will be the route you take to try to win. And this is where your disaster cards will go, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then this is bonuses and minuses you get depending on the disaster card, which we'll talk about in a minute. Now that you picked your character, you get your meeple. So let's say you picked Bad Luck Bronto. You get your little meeple. Each character has its own meeple, and as you're playing, the meeple will go on your board, and you'll start on where it says start. Now when you get started, you'll have a main deck, and each person gets 5 cards from the main deck. And there are multiple types of cards that you'll get from the main deck, some of which are the point cards. If you start your hand without any point cards, you discard your hand and draw 5 more cards. This is how you play the game. You'll have these cards, and at the start of the turn, everybody plays 1 point card face down. Now, some of the point cards have no abilities, and some of them have abilities that do all kinds of different things, interact in different ways. But basically, you'll play your card face down, everybody reveals the card, whoever has the highest point wins that round. But then there's, of course, abilities to take into account. There are the character things to take into account, which we'll get into a little bit. Now, the other cards you're going to have are the instant cards. These are cards you play after everybody reveals their point card, or when it says. It'll say on it when to play it. Right there. Play this card during scoring. So when you're scoring your point cards, you're going to play this card. And you subtract 2 points from any player's score this round. So basically, if you're doing it round, and let's say you had your handy dandy cool stick out, well, he only has 1 point, so obviously you're not going to do very well. So you could use instant cards to help you, like score inversion, which changes the lowest score with the highest score. So then all of a sudden you had your cool stick and it switches with the highest score. And then there's score boosters, which increase your score, or you can use and increase somebody else's score, so you can use the score inversion or any other combo of things. The only one that is different is this one, disaster insurance, which is you play the card when you would add a disaster card to your disaster area, which is right here. That's your disaster area. At the start of the round, before everybody puts their point card down, you put down a disaster card. There are 3 colors, but there's technically 4 types, because this one counts as one of each color when it adds to your disaster area. So there had the 3 colors, the red, blue, and the green. And then, so each turn at the beginning of the round, you would reveal one of these, and that's the disaster everybody's trying to avoid. So we go back to the character, and you have this little here. So say it's a green one, you get +1 to your score. If it's a red one, you get -1. And they all have this. The only one that's different is Stego, who his is specifically for the meteor. For this one, he's the only one that gets a bonus or a minus from this one. Everybody else gets nothing. So back to the disaster insurance, because we kind of missed a step. Anyway, so if you're to lose and you gain a disaster card, you can just play this, and it puts it back to the disaster deck to avoid the disaster. You start a round, you reveal the disaster card, everybody plays their point card face down, Everybody reveals the point card. Everybody plays whatever instant cards they want. They factor in the characters, little bonuses for the disaster, and the round is completely over. You're figuring out the points. Now, what you're going to do, say you win. You're going to take your little meeple and you're going to move it by however many points you got that round. So let's just say you got 7. So you got 7 points, so you get to move 7 spaces. Only the person who wins gets to move by how many points they got that round. Now, also, at the end of the round, everyone gets to move for however many disaster cards they have in their disaster area. So say the person that won got a 7, they would move the 7, and then say they have 2 disaster cards. They would move 2 more spaces. Or say you lose, and so you don't get to move anything for your points, but you just gained a disaster card, and maybe you already had a disaster card. So then you still get to move 2 points. And how you win, well, one of the ways you win is by getting to right there where it literally says win. How you lose is by somebody else getting to win, or if you have all 3 colors, the blue, the red, and the green, 3 of the same color, so 3 greens, well, I mean, that's how you lose. But then also, that's where the meteor comes in, because the meteor counts as 1 of each. So say you only have the red and the green, and then you get a meteor. This will count as the blue, so then you'll lose. Or say you have 2 red, and then you get a meteor. This will count as the 3rd red, so then you lose, which is where this guy comes in major handy. And one I forgot to mention before, disaster redirect, which you would play this whenever you would add a disaster card to your area. You can instead send it to somebody else's area, which is really good if you lose the round and a disaster would come to you that would make you lose the game. You can send it to somebody else. They could then play disaster insurance to stop it, but at least you'd be safe. So in summary, at the beginning of the round, you have your 5 cards. You reveal the disaster card. You all play a point card face down. You reveal it. You play whatever instant cards you want to play. Factor in the characters negative or plus for the disaster card. And you determine who wins by whoever has the most points. And the winner moves that number of points. And then everybody moves for how many ever disaster cards they have. Whenever you get 3 of the same color, 3 of the different colors, you lose. When somebody gets to the win spot, they win and everybody else loses. Pretty simple, pretty fun. I like it. My friends like it. We played it a bunch of times. I think you should check it out. Happy Little Dinosaurs, a product by Unstable Games, has quite a few expansions now. And today we're going to talk about the 2 to 4 player expansion pack. So let's get started. The expansion comes with 2 new characters, and along with them, like the base game and a lot of their games, you get a little meeple for each new character. There we go. And that guy. And for each character, they also get their own character board. Now, a big change with this one is that unlike the other characters, they have 2 different colors or types of disasters that they either get a plus or a minus on. So like on this one, he gets a +2 if it's the red one, but he gets a -1 if it's either the green or the blue one. And then Terry gets a +1 if it's red or blue, but then a -2 if it's green. Otherwise, the board is the same little path, same little area for disaster cards. Adds a bunch of new instant cards, regular cards, and disaster cards. Now they all have different kinds of effects. There's no new real big mechanics with the cards in the expansion, so you can just read them and they're pretty self-explanatory. So all you do is just add these to the deck of the base game in order to make it a bigger deck. Now the biggest change in the expansion, other than just new characters, is also a few new rules when dealing with 5 to 6 players. So in the normal game, whoever has the highest score moves their meeple. If you're playing with 5 to 6 players, the 2 people with the highest score moves their meeples. And then the person who has the lowest score still gets the disaster. And then everybody still moves depending on how many disaster cards they have. And then there's a whole section here about resolving ties for 5 to 6 players, since the top 2 people get to move. Is basically like If the top two people tie, well, they both still get to move, and you don't have to worry about a tie break. And nobody else, the second highest person doesn't get to move because the first two were tied, so they get to move. And then the person with the second highest score doesn't get to move at all. And then if there's only one person with the highest score, but then there's two people who tied for the second highest score, then all three of them just get to move. And then if one person got the highest score and everybody else tied for lowest, then only the highest scored person gets to move, and everybody else has to do sudden death to determine who gets the disaster card. But otherwise, all the rules are basically the same. Nothing really changes other than that the people with the two highest scores get to move. But other than that, all the rules are the same. Cards aren't too drastically different. They just have different effects. You just read them and they do what they say. So that's the 5 to 6 player expansion for the Unstable Games game Happy Little Dinosaurs. And this week's video will be on the new Happy Little Dinosaurs expansion. Hazards Ahead. So basically this will be a update to a games I'd like to play video for Happy Little Dinosaurs. Now the new expansion is out, which I'm very excited about. Looks really good. So we're just gonna be talking about that. So first off, what it comes with. 2 new characters. There we go. Both of them. Really cool. So they have a little, their plus is for hazards, which we'll talk about in a second. And then the minus is for the green, and then for the blue. I really like how the blue one looks is inside. The art for it looks really cool. It's like the meteors coming down into the water. So speaking of the hazards, it also comes with these new little token guys. That looks like little hazard cones. If I can even get it. Looks like a little hazard cone. And then for the characters, they each come with their own little meeple. I'll focus on them. There we go. They each get their own little meeple. So, speaking of the hazards, these are the hazard cards. They have the black background, it has a little hazard symbol on it. Because now, basically, and we'll show you the book, basically set it up the same way, just now you have a hazard deck. Because when you start play, you put one of these little hazard guys on the 20 spot, space 20. So space 20, you put a little hazard guy there. So then as you're playing, when you get there, you draw a hazard card. And a hazard card is basically like a disadvantage, a downgrade. So like there's this one. This is the first one that was in the thing. Up in Flames. If this is in your hazard area, subtract 1 point from your score for each hazard card in your hazard area during scoring. So it just gives you a negative effect. And it stays in your hazard area until you get a card that lets you take it away. And you can only have 2 of the little hazard cone thingies on your board at a time, but you can have as many hazard cards as possible in your hazard area. Because now the disaster cards they have with it, they also added a bunch of new disaster cards. They all have the effect of when you add this disaster card to your disaster area, you may add a hazard token to any other player's escape route. So you can add hazard tokens to other players' escape routes, but then you want to remember they can only have 2, max of 2 on each one. So you don't want to give one to somebody who already has 2, because then they won't even get it. Part of the strategy. And they also added new, like it has the same effect too. It just looks different. The comet that acts as all 3. And the win and the loss, how you win and lose is the same. This is just an added thing to make it harder. And they added some new cards, which basically are about the hazards. All their effects have to do with the hazards. Adding hazards, taking away hazards. There's a hazard redirect, which is, there we go. So I'll focus on it. There we go. Hazard redirect. It's basically like the comet redirect, but for hazards. Now another big thing they added was Lucky Day cards, which goes in the disaster deck because it has the purple back, just like the disaster cards. It goes in the disaster deck, but these are good. These help you. Oh, it's only 4. thought there was more, but there's only 4. Yeah, there's only 4 Lucky Day cards. Try to get out there. Ooh, yeah, there's 4 Lucky Day cards, and they all have positive effects. So basically, when you're playing, usually when you have the lowest score, you get the disaster card. But if the lucky card comes up, you get the lowest score, then you get the lucky card, the Lucky Day card. And they have things like, if you would add this to your disaster area, move it to the bottom of the disaster deck instead. Then look at the top 2 cards of the deck, choose a card and add it to your hand, then discard the other. So they have like positive effects, and then you don't add any disaster card to your disaster deck. Because there are even some of these cards too that help lower your score. And they're like, if you have the lowest score, then this happens. Because then when you can play them for when a lucky card comes up, and it's like, oh, you might actually want to win that. But then on the other side, you don't win, so you don't get to move as many places as you usually do, as you would if you had won. But if you lose, nothing bad happens. Something good actually happens. And that's basically the whole thing, I guess. The hazards, new cards, new disasters, the hazards. That's the whole, I don't know if you can see that. That's the whole rule book for the expansion. Makes it up to 5 to 6 players if you don't already have the 5 to 6 player expansion, which I do. As this one also adds 5 to 6, makes it up to 5 to 6 players and adds two new characters, but it doesn't add any other mechanics or things. I also have the dating disasters, which just adds a bunch of new cards and new disasters and stuff, and it adds disasters with effects. Here, we'll open this up. I wasn't planning on doing this, but might as well. Yeah, they added 3 disasters with the little effects there on the bottom. Like this one's, during scoring each round, you may add 1 point to your score for each predatory disaster card in your disaster area. So it actually helps you. They're all the same thing, just for the different type of disasters. But it actually helps you. So it's like you get the disaster, oh no, but then you get a bonus because you have that disaster. And then of course, like in the normal game, you get to move how many other disasters you have. And I like too with this, don't know if, oh shoot, I left that out, okay. Let's see if there's an easy one you can see it on. Yeah, there we go, on that card. Right there next to the number has a little, let's see, there we go. There's a little safety cone. So that's how you know which cards are for the expansion. Like how on the dating disasters one, there's a little heart symbol. So just so you know which cards go with which expansion, that way you don't have, 500 cards in your deck trying to play. And I mean, you can if you want, but like I want to keep them all separate for when I'm playing the new expansion. I want to try out how the hazards work and the Lucky Day cards and all that stuff. I don't want all this other stuff muddling it up and getting in the way. But basically, that's it. Happy Little Dinosaurs. Hazards ahead.